Hi, and welcome back. Week two, we've gone through a lot of the discussions, and so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the discussions that we've had, and kind of give you some feels about how I probably would have answered them. Not to suggest that any of the answers were bad. In fact, I do want to address a concern that I have with that, and I will in a minute. But I also really want to talk about discussions one, two, and three, how I might handle them, and if I was answering it as a member of the class. So before I go on, I do want to mention a couple things. And one of them is that usually if I notice that a lot of people do a post, reply to a post, usually I'm not going to go ahead and probably chime in on that. I'm seeing a lot of discussion. I'm very happy with that, and I think the biggest thing actually one of the worst things that a professor can do is get involved and just squash or add something to that. I want you guys to learn them from yourselves. Now, obviously, if somebody says something that's you know completely off on third planet, or off the planet, or rude or mean or anything of that nature, then obviously I would jump in. But for the most part, everybody's been very professional, and so I'm not going to. My thought is, there's an emergence that sort of seems to take place that we're pretty happy with. So yeah, and that's what I've kind of seen with all the posts altogether. Sometimes when I do jump in, there's generally one of a couple reasons. Number one, you have a fantastic post, um, and I just want to add to it because I want to respond so that I can add some stuff to that. Now, with a smaller class, I probably do a lot more of that. In a larger class, I don't do that nearly as much. And so if you didn't get a response from me, I don't want you to have any misunderstandings that, oh, well, the professor doesn't think that I did well with it. That's definitely not the case. I've looked at everyone's posts. I thought everyone did a fantastic job this week, and I would very highly encourage you guys to keep that up. So please do. The second reason why is sometimes you'll say something that's a little interesting, and sometimes I want to get in and I want to say something about it because maybe it's something I've been thinking about over these past few years. And I'm thinking about a very good example. I'm going to try not to name names, and the reason why I'm not going to name names is this is going on YouTube, and YouTube is available to the entire public at large. And when I say the entire public, I mean we're talking people in halfway around the world could watch this if they wanted to. So I'm not going to put everybody's names out there. So I just want to make sure that people kind of understand. But there was a post about the continuous aging of U.S. People in the United States. This is a big topic that we're really talking about, and at first I was kind of on board with the train. Yeah, hey, all these boomers are going to be retiring. We're going to lose all this knowledge. My God, what are we going to do? What are we going to What are we going to do? And then, I'll share something with you that probably professors don't normally share. But I was at a cocktail party. Met an individual who's pretty works as a senior leader in a pretty large organization. And we got to talking about succession planning. Succession planning is this field, and believe me, there's people making thousands or millions of dollars off trying to get people to get succession planning done. If 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 succession planning wasn't seen as that valuable, there would be like an entire industry gone, and I can imagine it's in the millions, if not billions, of dollars. To just get people to think, hey, wait a minute, Joe Smith, you're hitting 65. You're going to have to retire at some point. You need to sit down with somebody who's a professional that's going to be able to go over this with you and help you transition the company to somebody else. And then there's not one way to do it. There's hundreds of ways to do it. So I was also in the fact that I was buying into this too. And then like I said, I met this one HR director, and he kind of came to me and he said, Kevin, do you really think this is the first time we've encountered this in the human history? And I was like, no. Obviously, people retire. I mean, other than obviously in the 1700s, retirement probably wasn't the word for it. It was, you kept working until you were either dead or you were wealthy enough to not have to work anymore, which it didn't happen with very many people. So now, I guess it has been happening a lot. He said, "Do you think that we needed all this fancy stuff to do all this?" And I'm like, no, I guess we really kind of didn't. Now, to get back to this, I've been, and look, I don't want to bring this up with the idea that succession planning is a complete hoax. It's not. It's not. Good succession planning, I do think is very valuable. But we seem to be raising a lot of alarm bells about, holy smokes, we're really going to lose all these people. And it's just, I just find it fascinating. And look, the student who I'm looking at his name. I don't want him to like I said, I'm not going to say his name on YouTube, but my response probably came across as what the heck is the professor getting at? That's what I wanted you to know. Okay, so I just wanted you to know that this is just something that I was hearing by somebody else. It's gotten me to do a lot of thinking, and that's kind of what this online learning is all about. We're supposed to, somebody's supposed to say something, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I wasn't even thinking about that. Wow, that's something that I learned that was very valuable, which is part of the reason why we do viewership grades, not to go all parent on everyone and say, well, this is why I do something that some people might find that's drives them crazy. So, just to kind of throw things out there, like I said, I heard a guy talking, and the way he explained it to me is, like if you go to a manufacturing facility, and as things go down the conveyor belt, you'll have multiple things that are coming down and happening at the same time. I've never really found a better analogy of it, so if somebody could find one, feel free to put it out there. Believe me, I'll give you credit for it for probably for the next 10 years. But the fact of the matter is that as something is moving down the conveyor belt, obviously it's like not necessarily, don't think of it like a car, but I was thinking of like the cookie factory. Another one I was thinking of was Hershey's. If you've ever been to the Hershey plant up in Hershey, Pennsylvania. It's actually really fascinating to go to. But as the thing is moving along the conveyor belt, multiple things are coming down all at once to treat groups of things as they're coming down. Okay, so experiences kind of do that to organizations, right? So if I have 20 people working in my company and I'm the Gen Xer, and I've got a bunch of millennials and I've got some a few Gen Ys. And somebody decides instead of retiring, they want to come work for me part time, so they're a baby boomer. We all go through that experience all at once, and as a result of which, we probably all experience that. And as a result of which, if I decided to retire the following day, and the baby boomer obviously retires at the same time, well, maybe he or she would retire earlier. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Gen Ys and the and the millennials wouldn't have that experience with them. So it just got me kind of thinking, and so I just wanted to kind of put that out there, sort of to give you a sort of a just an idea. That's all it really was. I'm not trying to sound like the rambling old guy who has nothing to really say about it. I just wanted to throw that out there. There's another person who I'm trying to see, because I thought that I had saved them. No, I did. 1 second. I thought I had done this. Oh, you know what? Actually, I had typed it up, and then I got done with it, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to post this. And there's a couple reasons why. Some of the arguments that I was getting at, I just couldn't condense it down, and really would have come across as the crazy old dotard, and I definitely don't want to be that person. one of the things that I really, really wanted to chat about was sort of this. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Instead of that, I'm gonna talk about my answers, and I'll probably cover what a couple of the students had done. So let me just make sure that I get myself or reorganized because I was going to talk about these in a specific order. All right. That's a two. That's a two, and that's discussion one. So we're going to have that like that. Okay. So we had so discussion one, which basically was describe the marketing position for total rewards for at least two organizations. Now, everybody was required to go out and choose two companies. And look, I almost want to put a requirement in some of these classes. Don't choose an IT company, like a major IT company, Google, Facebook, Amazon. Actually, it's not really a technology company, but it's a pretty large company. Microsoft. The reason why is because everybody, and look, okay, I get it. Google's got great things going on. But ask yourself why. Why does Google have such great benefits? I guarantee you, Google doesn't do good benefits just because it feels like it. Google does good benefits because they are in an excruciatingly competitive market. They're begging for the best and the brightest, and they want to keep them there. And as a result of which, they're going to offer some of the best benefits possible. I always find it fascinating because trust me, as a person who owns his own business, I would love to be able to have a workforce of 20 people, and I've said this on the program in the past. I want compensation lagger, benefits leader. I want people with Anthem Healthcare or Blue Cross Blue Shield, whichever one we fall into. I want people with, that they can get the free Costco membership. I want the ones who, can get the free, a gym membership to go with it. I want the, hey, there's, the ping pong table, the foosball table, and all that sort of stuff. So when people are having a little bit of time off, they can go in and they can go knock some ping pong balls around or foosball around or whatever. I want those benefits, but I also have to kind of temper it with the fact that I have a budget. I have to. I can't just give everything to everyone. If I did, I'm gonna. I guess if I moved out of my house and moved into a shack, I could probably afford it, but it's just not realistic. You know what I mean? So there's certain constraints and things of that nature. I guarantee you, if Google had a choice between offering outstanding benefits or increasing the compensation of some of the or not increasing the compensation, but also or saving the money for themselves, I guarantee you they would rather save the money for something else. It's just they are offering these benefits because there's just that intense competition. Facebook, same thing. Okay, Microsoft. I remember when Microsoft first came onto the scenes in the mid '90s. I was going to school in Spokane, Washington. The greatest job you could get was going to work for Microsoft. I actually went, met with the Microsoft team. Dropped off my resume, had a couple initial interviews, and I kind of came to the conclusion that okay, yeah, I'm probably not going to want to work here. And I think part of the problem was that I was more of a database guy when I was in college, and so obviously they're not the big ones for databases. Oracle is, and I just didn't have a close access to an Oracle place at that time. So long story short, just didn't work out for me. So I chose not to do that. However, that was kind of like the big thing. So everybody wanted to work there. Why? Because they offered everything to everyone. It seemed like they seemed to have the best benefits. The tech companies have that because of that intense competition. Very good example, manufacturing. They don't offer intense benefits like they used to. They don't offer it for a couple reasons. Number one, we see the decline of the unions, good or bad. I'm going to let you make up your own mind on that. But one of the things is that in manufacturing, again, Ford Motor Company didn't offer exorbitant pension packages because out of the goodness of their heart. They did so because the union went in and they negotiated on behalf of the workers, and as a result of which, this was one of the things that they did. Um, you know, like I say, good, bad, or indifferent. That's how that happened. So you know, there's always that kind of give and take, and it's going to be market forces. It's also going to be union pressures, and it's also going to be other things that are going to cause them to make decisions as to how they're going to pay people and deal with stuff, and so on and so forth. So I think that, you know, everybody always likes to take Google and Facebook because, you know, they're kind of flashy, and of course, you know, I'll be honest, I'm a Facebook head. You know, I'm on Facebook all the time, so you know they're obviously a big company that I take part in all the time. But there's so much more out there, and so when we get to assignment one, and we'll talk about it in another video, and talk about assignment one, I do not recommend using Facebook or Google or any of those guys. First of all, most of y'all don't work there. If you do work there, go ahead and use them. Go ahead and use them. I would say go ahead and use them. In fact, provide insight. I would recommend against using them for a couple reasons. Number one, they're not really typical norm of what's going on. And second of all, do it as a personal favor to me. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to look at Facebook, Google, actually not so much Facebook, but Google, and you know, I mean, it's just a presentation that happens all the time. And the bad news for you, if you decide to use Google, I have probably about, yeah, I'd say 40, maybe 50 students' history experience of what Google says. So, you know, there might be kind of like, well, wait a minute, you know, the past 10 presentations I read on Google didn't say that; they really said this. So now you kind of get into that realm. It's like, okay, you know, I feel like I've learned enough about Google. You know, do something interesting, do something fun, and all that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Okay. Number two, share 2 examples of how changes in demographics have resulted in changes to total rewards in the organization. So I would say 2 major changes in demographics that I've seen really has been, you know, and here's the thing. When people say changes in demographics, some of y'all might be looking at this and saying, oh, well, you know, hey, Gen Xers want this, and, you know, millennials want this. I tend to look at it from like a really long period of time. I'm not talking like 100 years, 150 years. When you take a look at the role of education in college, the purpose of education in college back in the 1800s was not to find you a job. The purpose of education in college was to culture you so that you could exist within high society or within higher society. Most people didn't go to college with the intention of, okay, well, I need to go get a job, and so I'm going to go to college and blah, blah, blah. Now, like I say, good, bad, or indifferent, that's kind of, we've kind of evolved from that. But you really started noticing towards the late 1800s and the early 1900s, what ended up happening is, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, if you wanted to go learn about a job, you had to go to the company. The company would hire you with the understanding that, okay, we're going to bring you in, we're going to train you, and after we get done training you, you're going to work at point X, and you're going to probably work, you know, in a line of positions or a line of jobs that's going to last you probably for the rest of your life. And typically speaking, you know, the company may expect you to stick around, may not expect you to stick around. I mean, this idea that every single company offered lifelong employment, I think that's more of a fallacy than we give it credit for. But it's but you know, it's kind of the perception that was there at the time. It's not like nobody ever quit. It's just, you know, or was fired, or was laid off. Obviously that happened, but you know, sort of this idea that you know, you would go to the company after you can get your training and then learn how to do your job. Over the 40s and 50s, we saw some of that eroding. But then as we got towards, you know, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you know, as we got to 70s, 80s, and 90s, companies don't offer massive amounts of training. They kind of expect you to show up with what you need. A very good example. I was graduating from college. You know, I was competing with people who were already having master's degrees. You know, back in 2001, 2002, you know, everyone that I was competing with had master's degrees. We all knew how to set up databases. We all knew how to build, you know, PSQL for queries and everything. And so what ended up happening is there's you know you know, I had to go out and buy the training, which is kind of the reasons why, you know, as I'm sure many of you have, you know, there's some amount of student debt that happens as a result of that. Whereas we didn't have that in the back in the old days, because that wasn't where you went to go get your job training. Okay, so companies have sort of seen that shift happen. That is a major demographic change, I think. A major demographic change is who's responsible for learning, who's responsible for developing, you or the company. I personally think it should be the company, but again, I'm in the minority there. Most people think, no, it's really onto you. And you know, I remember when I was in the military, one of the first things they used to tell me was, nobody cares about your job or your career more than you do. And so you need to go out there and go do the things that are necessary. So that's a major demographic change. You know, and something else that's been sort of a major change also, I would say, is just perception of what work is. Um, you know, I would say, you know, a lot of, you know, the generation before the baby boomers, you know, work was, you know, it's just, you know, you went to work. It was kind of like your duty. It was kind of, you know, a lot of, you know, a lot of what you were required to go do. And it wasn't required because the law told you. It was kind of like when you grew up, you know, you're the head of the family. You need to go out and work, okay, and so on and so forth. Now, as we've seen a lot of changes, you know, for example, women entering the workforce, many more minorities being given opportunities to enter the workforce, whereas they weren't, say, in the 1940s and 50s. Um, you know, again, you know, as you know, I would this is one of the few where I would not say good, bad, or indifferent. This is definitely a good trend. But you know, I notice a lot of people put a lot of posts up talking about diversity. What's the best benefit of diversity? Okay, give you a few moments to think about it. But the best benefit of diversity is new perspectives that might give you answers that you might not have previously realized. Good example, you know, if Coca-Cola wants to, you know, start a huge marketing campaign operating within, you know, they want to, you know, so operating within a predominantly Latino community. Coca-Cola probably needs some people who actually understand what the Latino community, you know, wants, needs, and desires. Are they going to ask somebody like me? Probably not. I don't speak Spanish at the very least, and I most certainly don't understand. You know, I mean, I have many interactions with the Latino community, but you know, compared to some of the other minority groups that I've had, you know, like for example, Asians. I'm very involved with the Asian community because my wife is Chinese. You know, I probably could offer more insights to the Asian community than I could the Latino community. So they have to hire people who are going to actually understand that. And you know, but if you're not willing to, you know, hire people who are Latinos because you don't want believe in a diverse workforce, guess what? You're stuck. You know, and I think that's really kind of the answer to the diversity question is greater amounts of opportunity. You know, if greater amounts of opportunity are available for various communities, you're going to have an exorbitant demand for leadership in that field from that community. So I think that's kind of the way that you're going with that. So discussion number 3, and what, in your opinion, what are the 3 top elements to consider when setting compensation? I kind of thought about this, and me personally, because you know, as I was reading a lot, everybody had really great ideas. I remember, you know, one post, again, not naming names, you know, mentioned, hey, well, you got to understand the law, because if you don't follow the law, you're done. And I was sitting there going, bingo, you know, but it's also kind of like, well, yeah, of course we're going to have to, and so we wouldn't think about saying it, but at the same time, you know, you're kind of like, wow, actually, yeah, you're right. We would have to, you know, we have to think about that. And there's so many times where people get into trouble because that's not the first thing they think about. So I thought it was a very great answer. You know, another one, and I didn't actually bring up any examples here for this, but You know, the fact of the matter was, let's see, for top three elements, consider when setting compensation. Um, you know, I would say, you know, it's going to have to be motivations of the individual. You know, motivations of the type of people that you're bringing in. You know, and I think this is where you get into using compensation to sort of solve maybe some other organizational issues. Example, you have a diversity problem in your organization. You know, very good example in the accounting industry. We have a huge diversity issue. I think there's something like 3% of all accountants are African American. You know, 3% are all black. That is a horrible record considering the fact that the United States population is like 17, 18%. Um, you know, I feel that, you know, if you want to, you know, and that's where, you know, one of the things that we would say is how do we get more black people to get into the accounting industry? It's a huge topic, a huge discussion. And I think that, you know, there's an opportunity to take compensation and say, well, what kind of compensation do black people want? Well, we don't know. Why? Well, we haven't done a study on it. Well, go do a study on it. That's why I think that there's just that huge disconnect. And again, there's going to be people who are from that black community who will be very happy to come and say, this is what you need to offer. Okay, these are issues that are being run into in the black community. As a result of which, if you offer compensation packages that bring them in, they're more likely going to want to do it. Now, the biggest problem that we have is, you know, small little organizations like me. I can't try to lead the industry in this. However, the companies that do, KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, Ernst and Young, commonly called the Big Four, they spend an exorbitant amount of time thinking, how are we going to structure things so that we can bring these people into this industry? Because it is a big problem that we're having. So, and how does that affect us though? Well, we may be losing certain answers to this, you know, to the problems simply because we don't have that diverse workforce, and that's a huge talent loss, a huge knowledge loss, and a huge you know, benefit loss to the industry and to our clients in general. So we you know, we need to do that. Those are sort of my three answers. I thought everyone did a fantastic job. Keep up the work, and then stand by for the next video, and we'll talk about what we're going to talk about next. Thanks.